Welcome back. We're still talking about Flexbox. So next, we're going to revisit, well, I shouldn't say revisit. We're going to visit a property called direction. So with a Flexbox, the default direction we've been working with goes from left to right as the main axis and then top to bottom as the cross axis. But we can actually change things so that if we want to go from right to left, we can say flex row reverse. So flex row is the default, left to right. Row reverse goes from right to left. So let me just show you an example. I'm going to take, instead of centering all of these things, I'm going to say justify content start, and let's do align items. Let's do end. Okay, so when we say start, justify content start, it goes from left to right by default. And so we end up with the items on the left. And when I say align items end, it goes top to bottom when we're working with align items. So it's on the bottom. Now, if I duplicate this entire thing, but this time I also do flex row reverse, you'll see what happens. We didn't change anything else. I just said the direction is a reverse row. Now it's still a row, but it goes from right to left. So the main axis starts over here. So when I say justify content start, this is the start now. If I changed it to be end, that's the end. So I'll switch it back. And we can do the same thing, but actually change the vertical direction, and this gets kind of crazy, where we can change something to be a column instead of a row. So if we make something a column, I'm going to duplicate this one more time and say instead of flex row, we'll say flex column. And we can keep that in there to start. But you'll see that they stack vertically now. So if I get rid of these justify content and align items, when we change something to be a flex column, now we're working from top to bottom as our main axis, and then left to right for the cross axis. So for example, when I say justify content on a column, remember justify content works on the main axis, which used to be left to right or right to left. Now it is top to bottom in a column. So if I say justify content end, we move down to the end of our main axis. If I say center, it's going to be centered on our main axis. And then align items now refers to left to right. So if I say align item starts, it moves to the left because this is the cross axis. Our main one goes from top to bottom, cross goes from left to right. I know it's a lot, trust me, I know. But hopefully this is making a little bit of sense. So we've got align item start or align items end. It's going to move them to the right side. And then we can do the exact same thing. Let me change this back to start so you can see these are all equivalent except the row, flex row reverse, flex column. This one up top is flex row by default. I don't have to do that myself, but that is the actual value. So if we make one more, there's another value you probably guessed, which is flex column reverse. And what this one does is it says, okay, we go from bottom to top now and still from left to right. So in a reverse column, when I say justify content start, the start is at the bottom. If I say justify content end, it's at the top. So I know there's a ton to digest here, and actually there's even more if we wanted to be thorough. There's multiple utilities we haven't talked about. So we did direction, justify content, align items. There's also something called align self that I won't go into, but it allows you to individually align one of the items so that if we wanted to have everything aligned to the center except for one thing, we could align it to the top. You would use align self. There's also something called fill, there's grow and shrink. There's a whole bunch of things, and it gets really complicated, but it's also very, very powerful. What I want to show you right now is something super simple, though, which is how we can make things responsive. Let's say that I want things to be in a row, spread out on a large size. Then once we get to a small mobile size, I want things to go to a column vertically. So I'm going to just quickly fast forward and make a couple of things. Okay, so here's a really quick example I just made where we have just, 5, 6 buttons, and they're all in a row by default. There's no Flexbox involved at the moment. But you'll see that it doesn't look great, first of all. But then once we get to a small screen size, they start stacking like this, and I don't like how it looks. So let's say I want them to actually all stack vertically so that there's 6 rows on an extra small screen size. But then here I want them to spread out, but I want space between them too. So we can use Flexbox to do that. I can say on the container they're in, display flex, and it's not really a huge change. But then remember the default is that it's a row going across. So I can say justify content if I wanted to, center, or actually I think I'm going to do between. And we end up with this. It might be a little too much space, but let's say that's what we want. But then once we get to this small size here, I need them to stack. So I'm going to change it to a column, which is not that hard to do. The only problem is that there is no extra small, remember, so we can't just say column or flex extra small column. What we actually say is flex column. So that says you're always a column, except now I'll say flex medium is a row. So it's just like with the display utility. They didn't give extra small classes. So if you want something to happen at extra small, it always happens and then you override it. So now, here we go. It's still not beautiful, but they are in a column now. And then once we get to medium, they're now in a row. So you can see how this could be useful. I mean, obviously, we could use the utilities we've been learning to move things around. Like, let's not have them stretch, for example. So we could say align items if you wanted to start, and you could do that. I kind of like the stretch, so we can leave it at that. But you might want to add some spacing or something. Anyway, this is working. It's just a simple example I want to show you how we can use the responsive utilities. So we set it to be a column on extra small and small. Then once we hit medium, we make it a flex row, and we justify content between. Take any extra space and put it between them. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about how it plays into other components like navs, which you can use these Flexbox utilities inside of.